All right, great. Well, we should be live here with Real Fridays every Friday at 12:30. It's Real Fridays, and for the sake of our esteemed guest, Joe Tyrell, we Real Fridays. The genesis of this is really focused around having like real industry inside conversations around the markets, around mortgage lenders, around tech vendors, innovation, market trends. And obviously, I represent, I'm Rick Rock. I represent sort of the, from a leadership standpoint, the IMB space. But, having come up in the ranks of tech with leading sort of the product and marketing and the sales side of Calyx, and then working up from a contractual standpoint with Ellie Mae, kind of rolling into the last 15 years, it fits well with the narrative of the show. And then Jeremy being, in my view, one of the best lawyers in the country when it comes to tech, innovation, retail, supporting, really having a holistic understanding of the IMB and the tech spheres. And then, of course, we have Brock Cassidy, who's the Chief Revenue Officer at NewsZip, a really kind of exciting and what I would consider a pretty exciting real estate tech firm that kind of unites the loan officer, the consumer, the real estate agent in this sort of singular experience. And they've just done really, because of Brock, has done just such a great job in growing market share with community banks, mortgage companies across the country. But so Real Fridays is super happy to have you on, Joe. I've been a big fan, big user of Optimal Blue for, gosh, since Larry started the company. So it's been great to see kind of Optimal Blue sort of catch its stride again in the marketplace. So I'm really happy to have you on the show here.
Appreciate being on the show. This is great.
So bring us. Thank you, Brock. By the way, this is literally a first that Jeremy was on time and early, in fact, and I think it's the first that you were late to the show. So I'll have to.
Yeah. Good work, Barry.
So we did our introductions, and I'm super happy to have Joe. Typically, Joe will, what I think is just important behind like a technology company and the leader behind the company is really to understand the leader himself, separate even from the company, as it relates to the space and mortgage in general. How do you think like your time and tenure with Ellie Mae? I mean, you had such an amazing run with Ellie Mae. How has that prepared you to kind of, in some ways, I don't want to take a step backwards, because going from some sort of a large organization like Ellie Mae to go into a really micro-focused product as Optimal Blue, like what kind of shift did you have to make to kind of make that transition going from Ellie Mae over or really ICE over to Optimal Blue?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rick. It's one I get asked a lot because I think a lot of people were surprised, one, when I came back to the industry, and second, that it was with Optimal Blue. And so what was interesting about Ellie Mae is, you kind of grew up there because it started as basically bootstrapped with a couple of angel investors. Then it became kind of VC backed. The next thing you know, we go public. We're the top performing stock on the New York Stock Exchange for about a year and a half, just record growth. Then we get taken private by Thoma Bravo, and the next thing you know, we get sold for $11 billion to ICE. And so you have this opportunity where you get to see almost like 6 different companies while you're literally still at the same one for 15 years, right? But the one thing that was pretty constant about the company was the culture, and just really being laser focused on lenders. And I think a lot of that came from the fact that there were so many lending practitioners that were in leadership positions in the company. I mean, I started as an originator. I ran production. I ran operations. I was a former chief credit and risk officer for a lender. And so when I decided to leave ICE, and really it was because it was this interesting opportunity to spend time really going deep on generative AI and machine learning. Not heuristics, which a lot of people try to claim is machine learning, but true neural network machine learning. And when I left, it was such a great opportunity because the clients that I was supporting as a CEO of this other company was Meta, Apple, Walmart, Mercedes-Benz, Marriott, like these global brands that were really embracing generative AI. So you got to do a lot of really cool stuff. And so I thought I was never coming back to the mortgage industry. Like I was loving what I was doing. It was exciting. And I was really pushing the envelope from an innovation perspective. When I got the call from Constellation, my first reaction was, who's Constellation? Like I forgot, that they had some mortgage assets. And so when I learned about their approach and what they did and what they were looking for me to do with Optimal Blue, it was kind of like this perfect marriage of my entire career is for the most part has been spent in mortgage tech. So I got to leverage all of that, but I just spent a year and a half getting very deep with specific use cases of how to deploy generative AI to the biggest brands in the world. And so the thought was, if I could combine those two, and if Constellation truly was serious about letting me just come in and make major investments and run with it, like this could be a really great marriage of everything that I've kind of grown up with in the industry and everything that I've learned over the last few years. So that's really kind of what led me to coming back. The reason why it was Optimal Blue, and you know this better than anybody, like now in this industry, this is where all the revenue is made. You're not charging points and fees up front. There's a lot of pressure from both a regulatory and competitive perspective to lower your upfront fees to the consumer. So if you're making revenue, you're making it off of secondary market execution. And I wanted to be where the action was, and this is where all of the lender's revenue comes from. So when you put all those things together, it seemed like kind of a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things you mentioned was your ability to invest. I know, Constellation is known for picking mature businesses that can produce pretty steady returns, and then they trust operators to do their thing. That sometimes conflicts with innovation and having to spend a little to make higher end returns later. What are some of the things that you're in the midst of? Because I know that generative AI, and especially that interactive nature of AI, is becoming more and more of OB's, future. So it sounds like you've got a nice freedom roadmap to do that, but I don't think I have a good sense of like where that stands or where it's going.
Yeah, so I think it's super astute of you, Jeremy, to pick up on those facts. I think you're also being a little kind, because I think the reputation that Constellation had when I started diving in was they buy a lot of small businesses, they let them operate. But you don't necessarily see that they're making massive investments, right? And so for me, I really had to make sure that I was on the same page with the direction they were looking to take the company. And it was a departure for Constellation. Like one of the things they do really, really well, I've come to learn, is carve-outs. For private equity firms, carve-outs are kind of messy and ugly because there's a lot of operational noise that goes along with it. But Constellation does it really well. They love carve-outs because they know there's a lot of value in there. And so it's interesting to be on this side, because before I left ICE, I was part of the team that was creating the strategy for acquiring Black Knight. Now, what was interesting for me is I tried to acquire Optimal Blue twice. So once at Ellie Mae, and we got outbid by Black Knight, and then I tried to acquire a second time while I was at ICE as president of ICE Mortgage Technology. It, for me, was a big reason why I wanted to do the Black Knight acquisition, right?
Yeah.
Because you look at servicing, and yeah, the servicing is interesting to connect to the LOS because they create this customer for life ecosystem. But you just committed that you're going to make this multi-$100 million investment in a really old COBOL servicing system, and you already have 70% market share. So you're not going to get a huge return on that investment. And so I saw the value of being, but if you had Optimal Blue, there is so much that you could be doing from an automation innovation perspective to really just drive up the ROI for the lender. So after I had left ICE, I was very surprised to hear that the deal was going to go through with them divesting Optimal Blue. So my conversations with Constellation were, So two things. One was kind of business diligence of like, I'm not interested in coming in and managing a company. I'm interested in coming in and just fundamentally disrupting the way things have been done. And here's what that looks like. And it means investment. And it means, kind of getting rid of some of the things that I don't think Optimal Blue did well and preserving the things that they did. And then the second part of it was just the tech stack itself. I did a lot of diligence on that before I joined, and I was completely shocked at the modernization that had taken place over the last 18 months. So when I got the confidence of knowing that like this is the way I'm going to be able to operate it, I was kind of both feet in. And I think the other thing that put me over the top is, if I look at the landscape of who else is in the space right now, it's a lot of companies that are struggling, companies that took VC money and now they actually have to get results, people that are giving away a lot of stuff for free, which is going to come back to get you at some point when you start having customers that cost you to support. And so now I've got the backing of a $58 billion public company that doesn't do earnings calls, that buys a company and keeps it for life. So it's not a PE firm. There's no exit in 4 or 5 years. Like this is the permanent home for Optimal Blue. And I just and I don't have a board. Like I just get to go and serve customers. So for me, it was like that's the reason why I joined.
Joe, did you have a frank conversation with them to say like, look, I've been a long time Optimal Blue fan, but they had kind of a Calyx kind of aura about them where totally on top, a lot of legacy platform challenges of just serving a massive audience. And then you're being nipped at the heels of a lot of these newer, pretty impressive. Poly's a decent company. I think LoanPass is a decent company. I think there's a handful of companies that I think they're decent companies, but it's always hard to knock off like the top, the market share leader. And the only way to do it is to out innovate them and out hustle them and to really convince current customers that they're simply that the existing platform's not listening. Like Calyx clearly didn't listen, right? And in the market timing for going from Calyx to Encompass was perfect from a regulatory standpoint because like there was the lack of innovation met regulatory opportunity for Ellie to say, hey, we want to lean in on the regulatory side, where us at Calyx were like, we don't want that liability. Well, the market proved that philosophy wrong, right? And I felt like Optimal Blue was in jeopardy of being proven wrong, that the market was kind of running away from the way it always had been done. And I think that, quite frankly, you coming on board, I think made a lot of people pause to kind of say, well, wait a second, there could be something new coming. How did you bridge that gap between the old, the present, and the future direction of the company?
Yeah, it's a really interesting journey that we've been on at Optimal Blue since June when I joined. So I've been in the unique position of having to displace a really well-entrenched Encompass in Calyx Point, right? And then led the clear leader in the market with Ellie Mae and Encompass. And so now what I'm doing is I'm taking both of those experiences and applying them to Optimal Blue, kind of with exactly what you're saying, Rick. Like when we were coming in with Encompass, if you remember, there was 2 big changes that we were approaching the market with. One was the compliance angle, which Calyx didn't want to lean into. The other was Calyx and all the other LOSs at that time were form-based applications. So it was everything was built around the form, right? The 1003, all the disclosures. And so everything functioned like it was basically a digital form. And with Encompass, because remember, we own Genesis and Contour. And the thought was, all right, let's not operate both of these. Let's figure out which one do we move people to. And then that's when we made the decision to move them to neither, to just create a new one from scratch. And the difference was, let's focus on the users, the persona. Like, who are the people that are involved in this manufacturing process? So those 2 things, the compliance, which you highlighted, and just let's not make it about the forms. Forms are just an output. Let's make it about the people whose hands are on the keyboards. That and a very aggressive campaign of dropping Calyx Point discs in the garbage can is what helped us really, get to the new market share leader. Then staying there was all about, man, you gotta constantly challenge yourself, because when we
Joe,
started,
as a complete separate, I remember meeting with Jonathan, and this was probably in 09, and I was trying to broker kind of a possible acquisition between Ellie and Calix. And all Dennis and Doug kept on coming up with was that disc, that one. It was like, and that was like in 05. Like it wasn't even recent, but they were so pissed about that. But you were right to be able to do this sort of this philosophical shift from the form to the persona. What philosophical shift are you doing with Optimal Blue? Right? Is it is it the consumer? Like, who controls price? Is it the consumer? Is it the LO? Is it the capital markets guy that you never meet who's in a back room with no windows? You know what I mean? It's like where's the shift?
So it's interesting when you talk about generative AI, and which Jeremy was touching upon, that is, you got to first start with who's your customer, like who is the customer. And so a lot of people will say, the end customer for us is the consumer trying to get the home. I don't agree with that. That's our client's client. We're a B2B business. And so we got to first start with who is our customer. Our customer is the lender. So if we're going to deploy generative AI, boy, we better be solving their problems. We better be doing things where they see, oh, this makes me more efficient. This makes me more profitable. It drives more revenue. So for me, there's kind of three fundamental things that I had to look at coming into Optimal Blue to kind of address, the concern I had, which was, which Optimal Blue am I coming into? Is this the Optimal Blue from 15 years ago, or the one that's been maybe a little complacent and kind of feeling like they're ahead of the pack and people aren't going to be able to catch up? So three things I did is, first, I had to verify what had already changed. That was the technology. So, I want to come in and move quickly. I want to modernize things, and I wanted to make sure the tech stack was there to do it. So I was really pleasantly surprised. Open AI, API first approach, native AI platform. That's super important, because when people are trying to do generative AI, if you're bolting it on, it's not going to allow you to move the same as if it's been architected with AI in mind. So like our Compass Edge platform was built with AI in mind, so it's AI native. That's why we're introducing all these assistants, because it's built for it. Public cloud, so everything on Azure, but multi-public cloud. So we don't ever lose out on taking advantage of whatever the new innovation is from AWS, from Google, from whoever. And then brand new UI, like really incredibly intuitive UI. Now there was a problem with that, which was a good percentage of the customers on Optimal Blue are Encompass clients. And so in order to take advantage of that new UI, you actually had to be on ICE's Partner Connect solution, not on the SDK. And so that was inhibiting people being able to experience this incredible UI, because there's a lot of problems with getting onto EPC. There's a lot of people, as you know, who really use the SDK well beyond what it was ever intended to do, and are having a hard time getting off of it. So, but I did verify those things. They had already changed. So then I had to go to what can't change. So I'd always known whenever there was an issue between Encompass and Optimal Blue, and there was an accuracy issue, I always knew it was our fault at LEMA. Because Optimal Blue was the one thing that they always was the most accurate system. And when it comes to pricing and hedging and trading, like, you just can't get that wrong. So I knew that was still there. I knew that their scale and performance, especially coming off my time at LEMA, where it felt like every other day I was on the call having to apologize to somebody because the system was down, or it was intermittent, or it was some problem. Like, I wanted no part of that.
Yeah.
So knowing that it's very stable, the platform is scalable. And then the last is, did you retain the talent? Like, there's been a lot of companies in our industry where the talent's gone. Like, the people who knew the system, but also knew the clients and knew what it was like to originate a loan or hedge a loan or sell a loan, they're gone. And at Optimal Blue, the talent was there. So then I had to focus on, all right, what are the things that I want to fix? Because having partnered with this company for 15 years, I knew what they did well, but I knew what drove me just bananas. So I focused on fixing 5 things since June. First was transparency. Like it would drive me crazy that we'd be working on something and then Optimal Blue would introduce something that could have saved me like 10 sprints that I wasted because I didn't know that they were doing something. So we now publish a five-quarter rolling roadmap to everybody, including our partners. And if the competitors get their hands on it, don't really care, because knowing what we're doing and being able to execute are
two different things,
right? The second was flexibility. Optimal Blue was notorious for saying no. Like, hey, big clients, hey, we got this really unique opportunity. No, we don't do that. Well, I haven't even told you what I want to do. Yeah, it doesn't matter. We don't do that. So
Larry was focused.
Oh my gosh. So it completely eliminated that. So you're not allowed to say no. You have to say when. Now, I can't tell you when if I'm not telling you what else I'm doing. That's why transparency was first. So now you see what we're working on. You tell me you need to get it done. We'll say, okay, but here's everything else. Where would you slot this? And with these conversations, what we're finding is customers are going, well, actually, you're already addressing it now that I know you're doing it. Or these 4 things are actually more important than one thing I have. So that was the second thing we did. The third was price and value. Like the reputation was, we're going to charge you for everything. If you want to report, we're going to charge you for that. It's $300 a month. So I got rid of all of that. When I went to Constellation, I said, you're going to see me stop charging for things and starting to give things for free, even though they're already paying for it. Because I want people to have these capabilities, because there's an investor insight product that we had investors paying for. I'm like, why are they paying for that? Every investor should have it. It'll help them be more competitive, be better pricing for our customers. So all the new things we're rolling out, no incremental cost. Everything's included. We're rolling all these new values out and not charging for it. And then the last 2 are kind of hand in hand. Innovation. So I've launched 5 new generative AI since I got here in June that are all GA now. So really specific use case solving generative AI solutions that are not replacing anybody's job. They're not making decisions. They're assisting people to make faster decisions, smarter. And then the last one is control. Like it would drive me crazy when a lender would tell me, like, I'm trying to get this done, but I got to go to Optimal Blue. They got to make the change. So kind of what we did with Encompass, I'm putting way more configuration capabilities in the hands of the customer. So if a capital markets executive is like 2 o'clock in the morning, hey, I got to make this change, then they're going to have the ability to do that right then.
Joe, you just reminded me of a story when I joined Quicken Loans. Bill Emerson used to say that when you go to your favorite bar, especially if it's crowded, you don't need the bartender to serve you right away. What you want is the bartender to give you that look that you're next, or you're on their radar, so they're coming back. Then you relax. You're like, all right, they'll get to me, and I'll get my drink because I'm at my spot. I got noticed. And it seems like that's what lenders want. They want to know, like, okay, I see what you're doing. I see who you're serving. I see what the list is. Now I know where my thing is, and I feel good about that. So I'm going to pick up on the last thing you said, which was control. I've got a lot of lenders asking me right now, my clients and others, asking me about control. What should I own? What should I control? And what should I partner with? I'm curious if you could talk a little bit. It sounds to me like what we're saying is Optimal Blue is a pretty easy one to say, I don't need to own that. If I have everything coming to me the way the partnership you just described is, I should be good. But as you move through the lender experience, if they don't own anything, they're just constantly captive to these major systems. Product and pricing being one of them, LOS being owned. You have, experience obviously that you just said in both. How do you advise lenders? How would you think about it if you were telling me to tell them something? What should they own, and how do they think about control?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, from my perspective, having been a lender myself, and then obviously supporting them for my entire career, there's 2 things that they have to realize that they own. The first is the customer. Like, it doesn't matter what technology you're using. It doesn't matter what service providers you're relying on for the parts to assemble, to manufacture a loan. You own the customer. You ultimately are responsible for their experience. So a lot of what we're doing from a technology perspective is helping originators to be more proactive, to remember the types of communications, to create the right experience. Because the worst thing you can do to a borrower, like there's no UI in the world that will compensate for not being responsive to a customer, right? And so you got to know you own it. Don't wait for things to happen. Set your reminders. Be proactive. Even just the little notes to the customer of, hey, just want to give you an update. I'm still waiting for this to come in as soon as I get it all here. Just basic stuff, right? The second thing you own is the data. The lender owns the data. The LOS does not own the data. The pricing engine does not own the data. The hedging and trading system. It is the lender's data. And so expect more value. Like one of the big things we're doing is we're now giving the customer back their data in a way that gives them greater insights into how competitive they are. So for years, I would always look at Optimal going like, you've got such incredible real-time market insights that you're not going and giving back to your customer to say, I'm going to aggregate and anonymize the data. I'm going to show you 10 lenders that look just like you. And I'm going to show you how competitive you are in any market, in any product, in any channel, so that you can be informed of whether or not you're competitive. That way, when you're hearing your originators go, yeah, we're, in Austin, we're getting killed because we're 50 basis points out of market, you can look at something real time and go, yeah, no, we're not. We're right in the mix of where we need to be. Or, yeah, we're way out of market. So what are we going to do about that? And so a lot of, what we're trying to do right now is figure out how do we help the lender realize you own this data. What can we do to serve this back to you in a way where it's meaningful and can help you be more competitive? The more competitive that we can help them be, then, like I say all the time, yes, of course we want to help our lenders provide a better experience to the borrower. Of course we do. But we're a B2B company, which means we will do that indirectly. We'll do it by creating greater efficiencies, by helping them be more profitable so they can invest more, or in this case, by giving them real-time insights of how they can be more competitive in their pricing. That ultimately helps the consumer, but ultimately helps their originators as well.
Do you think, Joe, that AI is shifting, that is creating another shift, though? In other words, if AI is planarizing knowledge and information and making it far more accessible to not just loan officers across a company, an organization, it could be margins, it could be overall profitability goals, it could be just delivering sort of the best execution price to the consumer. Like that information is bleeding into the consumer sphere as well. So why not? Yes, legacy, present, the customer who's paying the bills is the lender, but at some point in time, the consumer is going to get empowered to that information, where the loan officer's influence on price or delivering that price to the consumer. Because I look at Brock's company, I love Brock's company, NewsIp, because they have this way of unifying the realtor consumer and the lender in this singular experience where the loan officer doesn't get detethered from the realtor. And at some point in time, like, right now, the knowledge center is the loan officer. I'm the smartest guy in the room, right? I got the pricing, right? Well, all of a sudden, I think that's churning to that knowledge is being level set to some degree to the consumer and potentially the realtor. Why not partner with a company like NewsZip or a company that actually can deliver that price? The lender wants that to happen, to be able to push that price to the consumer, where the consumer knows what the monthly rate, the rate, where their credit position is, what their monthly payment consequence is. And as a result, the consumer can initiate the lock and not necessarily, or the realtor in Brock's case, versus the loan officer initiating that. Or is that more complicated than it sounds or it seems?
Oh, it's exactly where this industry is going. Generative AI and AI in general is going to fundamentally change everything. And so if you look today, and Jeremy probably knows this better than anybody, just from a legal perspective, the reason why lenders are so hesitant to adopt AI is because of unintended consequences. They're just worried about, what if AI makes a decision and now we're on the hook to live with this for the life of the loan, and we don't have the financial wherewithal to deal with the scratch and dent portfolio that we have to season until we can prove it's okay for somebody to buy it. But this is where with generative AI, it's almost comical in our industry. So many companies are talking about, oh yeah, let us show you our generative AI, and there's no generative AI. It's if this then that heuristic baloney is what it is, and it's for a couple of reasons. One of it is the people creating the AI don't know what problem they're solving because they've not really done any of the jobs in our industry. So, they can put something on a whiteboard and it sounds great. Then you take it to a lender and it scares the crap out of them. And so what we're doing with generative AI is, and here's a perfect, to get right to your point, Rick. So you could use AI instead of worrying about introducing unintended bias, use it as an anti-bias tool. So that's what we did. So as an originator, here's what I would do. And it's the same today for the top originators as it was for me 20 some years ago when I was originating loans. You sit in front of a borrower, whether it's in person or over the phone or on a video meeting like we're on, and you start asking a few questions, and immediately the human being in you takes over, and you've already made up your mind that this is an FHA borrower. They're 5-6 questions in. You've already made up your mind it's an FHA borrower. So then you start going down that path, excluding them from all of these other programs that exist, because one, you haven't taken the time as an originator to learn about all these programs because they're coming out all the time, right? But then when you start going through the eligibility process, as soon as you get to yes, you stop. The minute you get to yes, I can qualify them, you stop. So what we did is we knew that was the deal. So we introduced a solution, a generative AI solution called Originator Assistant. And what it does is real time. It looks while you're talking to that borrower or prospective borrower at every loan program that your company has subscribed to or is made available to you as an originator. And it looks not only at absolutely every loan that they could qualify for real time as you're getting information, it also looks at every loan that they just missed out on. And it tells the originator, by the way, if they close this one trade on their credit report, they would now qualify for these 3 additional loans. By the way, if they put $3,000 more down, they would qualify for these 4 additional loans with rates that are much lower or lower their payment by hundreds of dollars per month. So what we're doing is we're using AI to actually eliminate the human bias that originators come with to make sure that they're seeing the full spectrum of loan programs available to that consumer. Now, the next step will be that the consumer should be able to interact with that on their own.
Yeah.
But when you deliver technology, you got to remember you're always delivering it in a spectrum. So you're going to have fintech companies that are going to be like, how do I get to headless automation and I get everybody out of the way and let the consumer talk to my tech? And then you're going to have the big regional banks where too much is on the line and they want people clicking buttons and seeing the button being clicked and getting confirmation I clicked the button. So that will exist for a long time. And so when we deploy it, we got to realize we're supporting everybody on that spectrum.
I think we should announce a partnership right now between Optimal Blue and NewsZip. What do you?
I
what do you say?
appreciate you talking my book, Rick. I'm just a fly on the wall here because I'm so far out of school on all the pricing engines and really everything we've talked about. But yeah, what we do, Joe, is we go to originators, we go to loan officers, we go to lenders, and any client that they run into that doesn't already have a realtor gets a pre-negotiated real estate credit at closing in all 50 states through our real estate network. If they close with us. So our top LOs present it very similarly to what you were doing. If you don't have a realtor, oh, cool. That means you're going to have an extra $2,500 at the closing table to play with if you want to go through our embedded real estate program. Here's what we could do with that extra money there. So I think that's what Rick's driving at. And we don't have any technical solution to that, but we have some really good human solutions that we've started. And this has been an area we've always wanted to talk about, but I was enjoying just listening to all the changes you've made in the first year or so at OB.
Yeah, it's been fun, and it's great to see, the way that the companies responded. So Rick, from going into lots of companies, when you go into a company, it's typically, it's the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 rule, right? Where there's 1/3 of the team, you just got to get them out of there because they're going to stand in your way of progress and making the changes you need to make. There's a third of the team that, boy, you can't lose because they know where all the bodies are buried. And then there's a third of the team that are really good, but they need to be coached and developed, and they need somebody to invest in them. That is not what I found at Optimal Blue. I found an entire leadership team that was like, let's go. Like, we have been waiting to run quickly. We've been waiting to say yes to the customer. We've been waiting to do all of the things that, I'm coming in and championing. And they're like, yeah, we're there. We're there for it. Let's move quickly. And all of them have incredible experience in the industry. Most have been lenders. So, I've been super lucky from that perspective. And that's really what's allowed us to go so quickly.
How many customers do you have, or do you publicly post that? Like, how many customers do you have?
We don't really publicly post it. If you look across the PPE, if you look across the hedging and trading platforms, and we have 3 different hedging and trading platforms. If you look across Comergence and all the other solutions, it's right around 6,000 different companies that leverage Optimal Blue for some various service or solution that we offer.
Are you seeing at all a rise in how many servicers are in their country? About 250, 300? Is that about right? Or how many servicers, Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie servicers are there in the country?
I've heard that number before. I think, when you start getting into the subcategories of the types of servicers, I think that number gets considerably smaller in terms of who are the really meaningful. It's definitely an 80-20 rule when it comes to servicers.
Because the one thing Jonathan always did well was Jonathan really zeroed in at LA. Like at Calyx, we were always like the number of companies that are out there, and we wanted that market share. And Jonathan's like, we don't care about the number of companies. We were looking at the companies who did volume, and we wanted the lion's share of those companies who did the volume. And I wasn't sure if OB's strategy was just to go after the servicers who are delivering the most volume to Wall Street versus the originators who are originating the most volume and feeding that volume into the servicers, or is it a both and?
Yeah, so what was different is back in the early Ellie Mae days, you couldn't be all things to all people, right? You had to focus on a specific segment of the market, go and really try to focus on being shared there, and then use that as kind of your anchor tenant, if you will, to then expand on both sides of it. So that was the strategy that we employed there. At Optimal Blue, it's different because we already have critical mass of customers in every client segment that you can imagine. And so it's funny because, we would talk a lot about when new competitors would come into the market, like the best thing that could happen to us from a competitive perspective is they start to get customers. Because then you can't be out just making promises. You actually have to start to deliver against those promises. That's right. Well, at Optimal Blue, we've been delivering against those promises for years with every size customer and every type of client. So when we're deploying our technology today, it is for, and this is kind of the challenge that's a really good discipline for us. If you're going to deploy technology to the biggest and kind of most advanced companies and to the smallest and the most wary, you got to make sure it's easy, super easy for them to absorb, to utilize. It's intuitive. So that's also been kind of a hallmark for us over the course of the last year. Everything we've put out, any company, regardless of the type or size, can immediately use it because we have to support that big of a spectrum of client.
Yeah, Joe, I want to dig into that a little bit because I've been working on 2 kind of tricky questions in this industry. And one is what you just mentioned around the impact AI has on those customers, that spectrum of customers. I joined the industry. My legal career has been brought up a couple of times. I joined the industry because of Dodd-Frank. I was a lawyer during the global financial crisis. Dodd-Frank happened. I was in Connecticut, which one of the authors was in Connecticut, and I just started in on that piece of legislation. And it took me into being an in-house counsel for mortgage companies. And the first thing I heard was, we're going to see massive consolidation. Fast forward 4 years, I joined Quicken Loans, Rocket Mortgage launches. This is going to cause massive consolidation. We heard it around wholesale, didn't happen. We heard it around COVID, didn't happen. Now we're hearing it around AI. And so I guess my first question of the tricky questions is, the way you describe true generative AI makes me think that the consolidation we're going to see is not in company number, but actually in high performers versus mediocre performers. That generative AI is going to actually really massively accelerate high performers, and those big loan officers and big producers and big regions are going to skyrocket, and the littler company or the mediocre performer at those medium to small companies is who's going to get consolidated. But I'm curious, now that we've seen 5 versions of crying wolf around consolidation, is generative AI a real consolidator? And do I have that theory kind of right? I know I cut out there a little bit. I apologize, but what's your take on that?
Well, and don't forget, especially with your background there, Redfin and Rocket, that's the next consolidation.
Yeah, right. We're hearing it again. Yeah.
Right, because of that. I think what's interesting is that generative AI could be a kind of a democratizer, but the challenge is it won't be, because you've got to have the wherewithal, the financial wherewithal, and the capacity to actually play around with it to really understand it. And those smaller companies, think about credit unions, for example. Like, how are they going to be able to really figure out for their members how to embrace generative AI? It's going to be tough because they don't have labs, they don't have engineers that can do hackathons on it and figure out, like, how would we make this work. So those larger companies that have been looking to embrace this, and many of them have their own tech companies, right? They're going to have an advantage. Just look at lead gen, for example, right? If you think about, like, Brock, in your world of what you're doing with lead gen, like, who's going to be able to do massive lead gen? People who have a ton of content that have been published, right? Because what's going to happen is lead gen is going to be generative AI based, and people are going to say, we're going to get the best rate tomorrow, interacting with either an Alexa device, or, quite honestly, the biggest shockwave, I think, for generative AI was the announcement the other day of IO getting acquired by OpenAI. Yeah. And Johnny Ive's company now merging with Sam Altman's, and whatever devices that they're going to put out, it's going to be a listening device. It's going to be something where it's going to hear you. It's going to just serve things back up to you. But you're just going to ask a question like, where can I get the best rate? Or I want this rate. And the companies that have taken the time to really curate, create, and push out that content, AI is only going out and grabbing data and source material that's available. So those big companies are already starting to think about how they're going to use it as a differentiator. So it's not even getting into the level of how to embrace the tech. I just have people who can go and write content and put it out there, and I'll get included in whatever the new ChatGPT 12 is.
Yeah, the SEO of all the different AIs, basically. Yeah.
Well, so this kind of begs the question, though, Joe. Like, Ellie obviously grew by acquisition, by consolidating a lot of feature and functionality into a singular sort of kind of like we were talking about with the Brock's company, into a kind of a singular technology platform, right? Like is an acquisition strategy in the works? Like, why wouldn't you buy a lead? Why wouldn't I buy the lead and have that consumer pre-qualified, the credits in check, the pricing's in check? Like, that's all part of the lead aggregation of the consumer, rather than having to fill out. You get some sort of teaser quote online, you fill out a rate, and then someone gives you the real rate, because we got to pull your credit, we got to verify all your income and your assets, and to really give you the real rate from the rate that you found. Like, why wouldn't you guys buy a lead aggregation company or a CRM platform or something, and then deliver that kind of natively into the sort of the lead gen experience?
Yeah, so acquisition is a huge part of our strategy. If you look at our 3-year strategic plan, even right now, we're looking pretty significantly at a number of acquisitions. So I put acquisitions for Optimal Blue into one of 3 buckets. The first one is, what's just something that's so obvious that the people who buy from us today would go, yeah, we should be buying that from you today. Right? And you think of who are the majority of the users in our platform. You've got originators, who are huge number of users, hundreds of thousands of users that are originators on our platform, and then all of your secondary marketing, capital markets executives, and key users back there. So the first bucket is, what are some natural things that provide a better connective tissue between those two? or just naturally things that you would think they would buy from us. So for originators, if you're in our solution and you're coming up with what you're going to position to a customer, why wouldn't we just give you more tools to make it easy to give it to them? Give them the information, something that is intuitive, that's interactive, that can respond to them when they have questions. So we're spending a lot of time there. And then in the capital markets, like what are other things capital markets executives use that they would expect that they would get from us? And like one simple example would be the same people that are managing capital markets are managing warehouse lines. So there's probably a technology for warehouse line management that would make sense to also come from Optimal Blue at some point. So we're deep into that first bucket. Second bucket are just other mortgage assets that would make sense for our expertise in understanding this market and serving lenders to make sense for Optimal Blue to own and to provide, because we'll bring our focus on very specific use cases for innovation and automation to make it better. And then the third one is kind of what you're talking about, Rick, which is there are technologies out there that are kind of more horizontal than vertical SaaS based that you could apply into this industry and are going to fundamentally change the way things are done here, because we're finally at a point where I think things will change. The two things that drive me crazy in this industry is when people talk about cost to originate a loan. Like, I think it's one of the most meaningless measurements that we have as an industry. Because if you go back and look historically, when volume goes down, the cost to originate a loan goes up. And when volume goes up, the cost to originate a loan goes down, which means nobody's addressing their fixed costs, right?
Yeah.
And then the second is days to close. You've got lenders out there that can close a loan in 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. But when you look at the average, it's still 33 to 45 days. Like, nothing has fundamentally changed. So I'm not interested in continuing to do more of the same. I'm looking to do something completely different.
Well, you just answered my second tricky question before I even asked it, because I've been saying the same thing lately about cost to originate. I'm so glad you said that, because we talk about it as if it's ever going to change or ever going to go down from these like external controls or things that aren't even able to move the needle. And it's a total red herring. It distracts the heck out of everybody. And then frankly, it gives us really bad press, because CNBC loves to pick up the MBA number and then run with it. And we've not been able to do that. So I really appreciate that perspective, because I really think it helps lenders right size the question of who's my customer and what am I trying to do here? What is my goal here? And you got to get really sharp. What am I good at? What am I not good at? And cost to originate is a distraction a lot of times to those two questions.
It's a soundbite in an election year. And the reality is the biggest percentage of that cost is commissions. So like, if you want to get real about lowering your costs and creating more, better ROI on your loan, you got to break it into the parts, and you got to attack each part specifically. Even tech spend, your tech spend should go up per loan.
Right.
And your mutual cost should come out. And it's like, there are all these studies that people put together. It's masking the real issue. And so for me, I'm only interested in really going after ROI and measuring it for our customers.
Yeah.
Well, just think about how much better the cost per closed loan would improve if tech was free. I mean, it's like it becomes so stupid, and I agree with you, Joe, in that you're looking at it the way bankers would look at it, and they're not looking at it more from a finance standpoint of looking at it more holistically. It's just not a very sort of intelligent way of looking at it. But I would say that, look, I love hearing the improvements in Optimal Blue. I love seeing you from a leadership standpoint, at the helm. Obviously, as we started the conversation before going live, I met one of your sales reps, Keith Smith, who I was so impressed with, and in this industry you get people like you and I, for the most part, that have been in this business a long time, and we've seen sort of the changing face of the industry. And when I meet people like Keith and others that are just so impressive from a professional standpoint, from a knowledge standpoint, from a potential evolving leadership standpoint, I just was so blown away by him. So if you're hiring fresh faces like that as you're reinventing the company, you reinvent companies through the people, probably first, and then i.e. you, and others around you, but fresh faces like Keith, and then you reinvent it through the technology and the services that you deliver, and it really almost goes in that sequence, you know.
I'm so glad, Rick, that you talked about Keith.
Oh,
what Keith embodies is the two things we really look for people that are Optimal Blue. So the first is cultural fit. So I won't divulge too much of Keith's background, but he grew up in a way where home ownership was not part of the equation in his upbringing. So he's passionate about it. So that's something that you can't instill in people, right? It's like they either have a passion about it or they don't. And the second is, and I'm demoralized every time I see Keith, because he's like this 6'5", great looking athletic guy, you know, something not only that I wasn't in the past, would never have been like to his level. He was a record setting receiver at Purdue in college football, did a little stint in the NFL. He's competitive. And that's the thing is that, you know, you've heard me say this in the past, one of the things that we will never do at any company that I'm part of is we will, even if we're clearly the number one provider, we will always act like we're behind. I want people that are hungry and competitive and just wake up every day going like, how do we get better? How do we get, you know, to be further and further ahead? And that is him to a T. So he's got that great cultural fit of it. It burns within him, but he's so competitive. He wants to make sure our customers win every single day. And that's really kind of, you know, what I found when I got to Optimal Blue that just made it a pretty easy decision for me.
I love it. Well, that's why Jeremy and I have Brock on the show. He's
Make that a foul. That's cool.
I had to loop it back somehow, Brock. No, I loved going to, and I know you had a wedding in your family, right? Was it a
Two? So
that,
craziest thing. So I have one daughter getting married May 31st. I have another daughter getting married August 2nd. But here's the crazy part: they're marrying brothers.
oh wow.
So the only thing that made this easy is the guest list is exactly the same.
Wow. Yeah.
It's like,
That's incredible.
well, that's the most northern Idaho thing I've ever heard. I love that, Joe. No, my son's getting married in April of next year. He just recently got engaged, and it is you get to that point where, you know, there is that changing of the guards, not just in the industry but within your families, and it's a surreal thing to kind of witness, but it's also just a beautiful thing to be part of and to support and to nurture and to sort of see it move on, you know.
Totally. And you said he's getting married next April?
In April, yeah.
Yeah, so as somebody who operates a secondary and capital markets platform, we love people who hedge.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm thinking about that. I'm literally having that conversation with him in about 3 weeks. So I love it. Well, good, Joe. I really appreciate you coming on board. I've loved your leadership for years. You've been, you've been a real leadership example to a lot of us out in the business, but certainly at Ellie. But everyone who looked at Ellie and the progress that Ellie made, and there couldn't have been. I was one of probably many, but I was definitely one, especially that was really excited to see you back in action on the front lines, leading this company. So I think Optimal Blue's got a great future ahead, and really excited to see you doing it.
Yes. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Joe. There was a reason I was early for this call. I mean, your insight just today, I'm going to send it out to all my clients. I'm going to send it out to lenders who need to hear it, because it's spot on. I really appreciate it. We learned a lot today, and I know your time's valuable. It means a lot, so we appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, my pleasure. It's great being with you guys.
Thank you, guys.
Cool.
Take care.
And that's a wrap for this Friday, May 23rd. Happy Memorial Day to everybody, and looking forward to next Friday.